Hey, Jeff Munn, Creating Extraordinary Futures. This week's Thanksgiving in the U.S., and I've been thinking about one of my favorite quotes for this time of year. It's from Ram Dass, who was a spiritual teacher in the 60s and beyond. He kind of came out of the 60s. And he said at one point, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family. And so I think about that quote a lot at holiday time. And I think about how often I will walk into these situations with my family, or I'll see my wife walk into these situations with her family, and it's like we suddenly become children again. We experience these wounds, these hurts, these stories that we've been living in and we've been telling ourselves as true for sometimes decades since our childhood. And then when we walk back in, sometimes it's someplace else, but sometimes it's our childhood home, right? And all of this comes up again, and we get triggered and we get defensive. And I know for me, for one of the things where my mom and I will fall into is we get a lot of energy around arguing about politics. And there is an aliveness that can occur, but it's also in the context of emotion and feeling bad and feeling frustrated and feeling like the other person doesn't value our perspective, or that all of these things pop into my mind. And I remember experimenting one time with my mom around, well, what if I just didn't react? What if I just said, that's interesting, I don't know. And I tried that, and she tried to poke me again. It's going to be really interesting to see how that develops. And then she stopped, and our relationship took a different turn. It seemed like we were wandering for a while. We didn't quite know what we were doing. Like the equilibrium had shifted. And what ended up happening, at least for us, is we began to be a little more genuine and a little more vulnerable with each other. And I'd invite you this week to, if there's levels of this, level one is just to notice how often you feel triggered and what that's about, and what that story is that you are telling yourself about yourself, that you believe that maybe is no longer serving you. Notice that triggering. What am I associating this with? Is that really true? Does that really serve me? And then the natural temptation will be to react the same way that you've always reacted, to say the same thing that you've always said when you're in that situation, or to withdraw the same way that you've always withdrawn, if that's your strategy. And so another thing to play with is, well, what if I did something different? What if instead of reacting, I noticed a gap and I chose differently? What would happen if I chose differently? What would the impact on the relationship, on the room be if I chose differently? So I'll let you experiment with that. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving if you're in the U.S. and have a great week, and I'll see you next time.